2,361 spent cartridges. That is what archaeologists pulled from the dirt at Little Bighorn, not from museum shelves or army records, from the ground itself. And when forensic specialists traced those bullets, matching firing pin marks, extractor grooves, rifling signatures, they discovered something the United States Army had buried for over a century. The warriors carried at least 371 individual firearms, 45 different types: Henrys, Winchesters, Spencers, Sharps, Remingtons, Ballards, Maynards, Enfields, plus bows, lances, and war clubs designed for killing at arm's length. Custer's 210 men carried exactly one type. The Springfield Model 1873 trapdoor carbine, single shot, load, fire, open the breech, extract the spent casing, insert a new round, close the breech, fire again. If the extractor didn't jam, if the copper casing didn't expand in the heat and weld itself to the chamber wall, if you weren't shaking so badly that your fingers couldn't grip a cartridge the size of your little finger while bullets from 15-round repeating rifles tore the air apart around your head, Custer wasn't riding into a battle. He was riding into an arsenal. And the 2,361 pieces of brass his men left in the Montana dirt told the true story 109 years before anyone bothered to listen. In 1868, the United States government signed the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The Black Hills of South Dakota, Pahasapa, the sacred heart of the Lakota world, belonged to the Lakota Sioux and their allies. The word in the treaty was perpetuity. It meant forever. Forever lasted 6 years. In 1874, Custer himself led an expedition into the Black Hills. His official mission was reconnaissance. His geologists found gold. The discovery was supposed to be classified. Instead, someone leaked it to newspapers in Bismarck, Dakota Territory. Within weeks, the story was on the front page of papers from Chicago to New York. Gold in the Black Hills, sacred Lakota Territory, treaty-protected land. None of that mattered once the word gold appeared in print. Prospectors flooded in by the thousands. The government had two options: enforce the treaty and remove the trespassers, or break the treaty and take the land. It chose the second, but it needed a pretext. The Lakota refused to sell. The government refused to enforce its own treaty. Instead, it issued an ultimatum: report to designated reservations by January 31, 1876. Or be declared hostile. Hostile. The word that turned a broken promise into a military campaign. The word that gave the army permission to march into Lakota territory and destroy anyone who refused to surrender land that legally belonged to them. Sitting Bulls, Hunkpapa. Crazy Horses, Oglala. Northern Cheyenne, Arapaho. They gathered along the Little Bighorn River for their annual summer encampment. They were not preparing for war. They were living their lives on land the United States had guaranteed them in writing 6 years earlier. The army came to them, 3 columns converging from different directions, and riding at the head of one of those columns, golden hair cropped short, ambition burning hotter than the Montana sun, was the same man who had found the gold that started all of it, George Armstrong Custer, coming back to finish what his geologists had begun. In 1872, the United States Army convened a board of officers to select a new standard-issue carbine for the cavalry. The board tested dozens of weapons. Among them were lever-action repeating rifles that could fire 15 rounds without reloading. The board rejected every one of them. The reasons were economic and philosophical. Repeating rifles used more ammunition. Ammunition cost money. The Army's budget was tight, and the board expressed a concern that sounds insane to modern ears. They worried that soldiers would waste ammunition with rapid-fire weapons. Spray bullets instead of aiming carefully. Better to give them a single-shot weapon that forced discipline. 1 round at a time. Make every shot count. They chose the Springfield Model 1873, a trapdoor carbine firing a .45-70 government cartridge, powerful, accurate at range, and fatally, catastrophically, single shot. Here is how the Springfield worked. The soldier thumbed back the hammer, flipped open the trapdoor breech block, inserted a single copper cartridge, closed the breech, aimed, fired, then opened the breech again and used the extractor mechanism to pull the spent casing out before inserting a fresh round. Under ideal conditions, a trained soldier could fire 8 to 10 rounds per minute. Under combat conditions, the number dropped to 3 or 4. Under the specific conditions at Little Bighorn, the number dropped further, because the Springfield had a flaw that the Army knew about and chose to ignore. The extractor mechanism was designed to grip the rim of the copper cartridge casing and pull it from the chamber after firing. But copper expands when heated. After 6 or 8 rapid shots, the chamber grew hot enough that the thin copper casing swelled and gripped the chamber walls. The extractor, trying to pull the expanded casing free, would tear through the soft copper rim and leave the body of the casing stuck inside the barrel. The weapon was now useless. A soldier with a jammed Springfield in the middle of a firefight had exactly 2 options. Dig the stuck casing out with a pocket knife, a process that required both hands, a steady grip, and 30 to 60 seconds of focused effort. 30 seconds does not sound like much. Count it out loud, while imagining that every second, a bullet from a lever-action rifle snaps past your ear. That is what 30 seconds feels like when your weapon is a metal club and the enemy's fires 15 rounds per minute. Or draw his Colt 45 revolver with its 24 rounds and pray. At Little Bighorn, archaeological evidence showed Springfield casings with knife marks gouged deep into their rims, multiple scratch marks on single casings. A soldier tried to dig the round out, failed, tried again, failed, tried a third time, while Winchester rounds cracked against the dead horse, 2 feet from his head. The Army had been warned. Field reports from frontier posts documented extraction failures for years. Officers wrote letters requesting replacement weapons. Some units reported failure rates of 1 in every 3 or 4 rounds in sustained fire. The requests were denied. Budget. Always budget. A repeating rifle cost $28. A Springfield cost $15. The War Department chose the cheaper weapon and sent its soldiers to fight an enemy carrying the expensive one. And here is the detail that should make you furious. One of the officers who sat on the 1872 selection board, who helped choose the Springfield over available repeaters, who voted to put a single-shot weapon in the hands of frontier cavalry, was Major Marcus Reno. The same Marcus Reno who would command a battalion at Little Bighorn. The same Reno who would spend 2 days pinned on a hilltop listening to lever-action repeaters tear his command apart, firing the exact type of weapon he had helped reject 4 years earlier. The warriors gathering along the Little Bighorn in June 1876 were not the Stone Age fighters that American newspapers imagined. They were carrying an arsenal that would have stunned any quartermaster in Washington, if Washington had bothered to look. The Henry repeating rifle, 44 caliber rimfire, 16 rounds in a brass tube magazine beneath the barrel. Lever action. Pull down, push up, a fresh round chambered. A skilled shooter could fire 15 to 20 aimed rounds per minute. It had been available since the Civil War. Confederate soldiers who faced it had a saying, "That damned Yankee rifle you load on Sunday and shoot all week." The Winchester Model 1866, the Yellow Boy, named for its brass receiver that flashed golden in the sunlight. An improved Henry with a side loading gate that allowed reloading without removing the magazine tube. 15 rounds. Lever action, just as fast. The Spencer repeating rifle, 7-round tube magazine loaded through the buttstock, 42 caliber. A heavier bullet than the Henry, slower to operate but devastating at close range. The Winchester Model 1873, .44-40 caliber, 15 rounds. The gun that would eventually be marketed as the gun that won the West. Here it was being turned against the army that had rejected its predecessors, and the Sharps. The Big Kill. 50 caliber single-shot buffalo guns capable of accurate fire at distances exceeding 500 yards. These were the long-range assassins. Weapons that could reach out and kill a man on a ridgeline from a position so far away the shooter was invisible to the naked eye. Crazy Horse himself carried a Sharps, serial number 16632. How did warriors acquire these weapons? The frontier arms market was a sieve. Traders sold firearms to anyone with furs, gold, horses, or cash. No questions asked. No records kept. Trade networks stretched from St. Louis to the most remote camps on the northern plains. A Winchester that left a Connecticut factory in January could be in the hands of a Lakota warrior on the Powder River by June, traded through 3 or 4 middlemen who cared about profit and nothing else. Warriors also captured weapons in engagements with soldiers and settlers. Every skirmish, every raid, every ambush added to the arsenal. After the Battle of the Rosebud, just 8 days before Little Bighorn, Crazy Horse's warriors captured Springfield carbines, Colt revolvers, and ammunition from Crook's retreating soldiers. The Army's own weapons were being turned against it within days of being lost. Some rifles were gifts from agency traders buying goodwill, distributed at reservations where the government was supposed to be tracking every firearm, but in practice tracked nothing. The government made sporadic attempts to restrict arms sales to native peoples. Enforcement across millions of square miles of wilderness was a joke that nobody on the frontier was laughing at, except the traders getting rich from it. By 1876, the free bands had spent a decade accumulating an arsenal the Army could not imagine because it refused to look. Every intelligence report that mentioned native firearms was filed and forgotten. Every field officer who warned Washington that the warriors were better armed than the soldiers was told he was exaggerating. And approximately half the warrior force carried traditional weapons that were anything but obsolete. A Lakota composite bow in trained hands could loose 20 aimed arrows per minute, faster than any lever action, silent, invisible, no muzzle flash to reveal the archer's position. And when distances closed to arm's length in the final minutes, stone-headed war clubs and steel-tipped lances entered the fight, weapons that never jammed and never ran empty and simply killed whatever they touched. Individual warriors step out of the historical record like figures emerging from smoke. Eagle Elk Oglala Lakota carried a Winchester and fought on the ridge where Custer's men made their final stand. He would later describe the sound of his lever action working in rhythm with dozens of others, a mechanical chorus that drowned out the Springfields completely. White Cow Bull, also Oglala, carried a Winchester and may have been the warrior who killed the first soldier at Medicine Tail Coulee. His testimony, ignored for decades, placed him at the exact point where Custer's column first encountered resistance. Ironhawk, a hunk papa boy of 14, fought with a bow and arrows. 14 years old. Still a child by any modern standard, he entered the battle because his camp was being attacked, and the people he loved were in danger. He did not need a repeating rifle. He needed 20 arrows and the skill to put them where they would do the most damage. And he had both. This diversity was not a weakness. It was adaptation. A fighting force that could engage at every range from 500 yards to 5 feet. Now do the math. On the ground where Custer's command was annihilated, archaeologists identified 134 individual native firearms against 81 soldier firearms. The cavalry was outgunned nearly 2 to 1.62. Of those native weapons were Henry or Winchester repeaters. Lever-action rifles capable of 15 rounds per minute. They faced 69 single-shot Springfields that jammed every third or fourth round. The 7th Cavalry was not just outnumbered, they were outgunned by a generation of technology, and they had no idea. June 25, 1876. Custer divides his regiment into 4 groups. Reno gets 175 men, 3 companies. Orders: cross the river, charge the southern end of the village. Benteen gets 125 men. Orders: scout southwest, miles from the coming fight. Custer takes 210 men, 5 companies. He will ride the bluffs and strike from the north. McDougal guards the pack train and the ammunition. The ammunition that might as well be on the moon. What Custer is about to attempt, attacking a village of 7,000 to 10,000 people with a divided force of 600, would be considered suicidal by any modern military standard. He has done the impossible before. Washita River, 1868. He charged a sleeping Cheyenne village at dawn and overwhelmed it. He believes he can do it again. He does not know this village is 10 times larger than Washita. He does not know the warriors here carry weapons that make Washita's defenders look unarmed. Reno's 175 men ford the river and charge. For a few hundred yards, it looks like it might work. The thunder of hooves, the crash of gunfire, the wall of horseflesh hurtling forward. Then the village mobilizes, not in panic, in fury, with a speed that would stun any modern military observer. Warriors pour from lodges, Winchesters and Henrys snatched from lodge poles, where they hung loaded and ready for exactly this moment. Quivers thrown over shoulders, war ponies caught from picket lines and mounted in seconds. The entire village goes from peaceful afternoon to full combat mobilization in less than 5 minutes, because every man, woman, and child in a plains camp had trained for exactly this moment since the day they could walk. Sitting Bull moves through the Hunkpapa circle, directing women and children to safety. Crazy Horse organizes a massive counterattack from the Oglala circle to the north, and this is where the repeaters announce themselves. Warriors with Winchesters and Henrys begin pouring fire into Reno's line. The volume is immediate, overwhelming. Soldiers who have trained for engagements where warriors fire 1 or 2 shots and withdraw are hearing something entirely new. A sustained, rapid crackle of lever-action fire that sounds like the air itself is being torn apart, not individual shots with pauses between them. A continuous rolling thunder of brass and lead that does not stop, does not slow, does not give you 3 seconds to reload, because the men firing at you do not need 3 seconds, they need half a second. Pull the lever down, push it up, fire. Half a second between rounds, 15 times before the magazine is empty, and then reload through the side gate while a partner keeps shooting. The fire never stops. Soldiers trained for engagements where warriors fire 1 or 2 shots and withdraw have never heard anything like this. For every Springfield round that cracks from the skirmish line, 5 or 6 Winchester rounds crack back. Reno halts the charge, dismounts, forms a skirmish line. Now his men are stationary targets. The position becomes untenable in minutes. Reno orders retreat. The word doesn't reach every man. The retreat becomes a rout. Soldiers scramble for horses, mount in chaos, gallop for the river. Warriors pursue at full speed, firing Winchesters from horseback, loosing arrows, closing with war clubs. 40 men killed or cut off in 30 minutes. The survivors claw up the bluffs and collapse into a ragged perimeter. From that hilltop they can hear something that chills them to the bone. Heavy gunfire to the north. Sustained, rolling, Custer's gunfire. It goes on for a while, then it stops. While Reno charges and is shattered in the south, Custer rides his 5 companies along the bluffs above the eastern bank, hidden from the village by the ridge itself. He can see dust from Reno's attack. He can hear gunfire. His plan is working, or so he believes. Reno is supposed to pin the warriors in place, while Custer sweeps north, crosses the river, and strikes from behind. Hammer and anvil. But Reno is not pressing the attack. He is fighting for his life on a hilltop. Benteen is miles away scouting empty valleys. The pack train with its ammunition is even further behind. Custer is alone with 210 men. He sends a last message back, scribbled by his adjutant on a moving horse. Benteen, come on, big village, be quick, bring packs. The misspelling in the postscript captures the haste. Bring packs, ammunition. The one thing his command cannot survive without. Benteen will not arrive in time. The ammunition will not arrive at all. At Medicine Tail Coulee, Custer's column descends toward the river. Warriors already positioned on the far bank open fire, with Winchesters from behind brush and cut banks. The ford is blocked. The column wheels north, climbing back toward the ridgeline. They are now on Battle Ridge, a mile of rolling terrain stretching to a modest hill that history will call Last Stand Hill. Warriors begin appearing from every direction. South, following the retreating column. West, crossing the river in groups. East, emerging from ravines the soldiers didn't know existed. And from the north, Crazy Horse leads a massive force across the river well upstream, invisible behind the bluffs, swinging east and then south in a wide arc that places his warriors directly behind the ridge Custer is trying to hold. Warriors from the south and west engage first, fixing the soldiers' attention forward. By the time Custer's men realize the shooting is coming from behind them too, Crazy Horse has sealed every route of escape with a precision that required no written orders, no signal flags, no communication infrastructure, just messengers on fast ponies and the shared instinct of warriors who had trained together since boyhood. Custer's 210 men are surrounded. The first shots come from long range, Sharp's buffalo guns booming from 400 yards. At this distance, the Springfield is a credible weapon, accurate, powerful, but accuracy is not the problem. Volume is the problem. For every round a soldier sends down range, 5 come back. Warriors use the terrain with devastating skill. Coulees and ravines provide covered approaches, invisible from the ridgeline. Tall grass conceals crawling figures until they rise to fire from startlingly close range. The ground Custer chose is not a fortress. It is a trap, surrounded by natural trenches that lead directly to his position. Soldiers begin shooting their own horses, deliberately, muzzle to the temple. The horse drops. They push the body onto its side and crouch behind 1,000 pounds of dead flesh, cheeks pressed against the wet heat of an animal that was alive 30 seconds ago. The only cover on an open ridge where the grass is 6 inches tall, not a heroic circle, a huddle of terrified men hiding behind the corpses of animals they had named and fed and ridden for years. The Springfields begin to jam, copper casings expanding in overheated chambers, extractors tearing through soft rims. Soldiers digging at stuck rounds with pocket knives while lever-action fire closes from every direction. The sound of the battle changes. The measured crack of Springfields grows thinner, slower. The rapid staccato of Winchesters grows louder, closer. The math is simple and merciless. 69 Springfields firing 3 rounds per minute when they work. 62 repeaters firing 15 rounds per minute every time. The cavalry is being outshot by a factor of 5. Companies collapse from south to north, like dominoes falling in sequence. Calhoun's position on the southern hill overrun first. Gall's warriors surge through the gap where Company L disintegrated, finding bodies in skirmish formation with boots still in stirrups. These men died at their posts, waiting for orders that never arrived. Company 1 falls next, cut apart by crossfire from warriors who have occupied the ground Company L just vacated. Company C in the middle dissolves. Soldiers scatter toward Last Stand Hill in groups of 3 and 4, running across open ground, while Winchesters crack from the ravines on both sides. Some never make it. Found in coulees, shot in the back, clutching unfired cartridges they never had time to load. The archaeological record shows their trail. A line of Springfield casings leading north, each cluster smaller than the last, each position further back. The brass tells the story of men retreating toward a hilltop that offered no salvation, only a place to die together instead of dying alone. On Last Stand Hill, 40 men cluster in a ragged perimeter. Not a heroic circle, a huddle, some already dead on their feet, held upright by the press of bodies around them. Others firing mechanically at targets they cannot see, through dust so thick the afternoon sun has dimmed to copper. A few have given up on the Springfields entirely, and are firing Colts. 6 rounds, then empty, then nothing. The warriors close. 200 yards, 100, 50. At this range, the Winchesters and Henrys are point-blank weapons. Every round finds flesh. The gap between the volume of incoming fire and outgoing fire is no longer a disparity. It is an extinction event. The perimeter shrinks with each minute until it is not a perimeter at all, but a knot of men standing back to back, some of them wounded, some of them out of ammunition, some of them holding Springfields that have not fired in 10 minutes because the casings are welded to the chambers and the knives broke trying to dig them out. War clubs and lances enter the fight. Bows loose arrows at distances where missing is impossible. The last Springfields fall silent, not because the soldiers have stopped fighting, because the weapons have stopped working. 60 minutes, maybe less. 210 men, 0 survivors. For 109 years, the Army's version stood. Heroic last stand. Brave soldiers overwhelmed by savage hordes. In 1881, Anheuser-Busch commissioned a painting called Custer's Last Fight and distributed 150,000 copies to saloons across America. It showed Custer standing tall, pistol raised, golden hair flowing, surrounded by feathered warriors swarming like insects. It hung in more American drinking establishments than any artwork in history, and every detail in it was wrong. The hair was wrong. Custer had cut it short before the campaign. The pose was wrong. No officer stands upright in a firefight. The circle of soldiers was wrong. No defensive circle existed. The savage horde was wrong. The warriors were better armed than the soldiers. The painting told a lie that 150,000 copies hammered into the American imagination so deeply that it took a prairie fire and a metal detector to begin prying it loose. In 1983, a prairie fire burned the grass off the battlefield. In 1985, archaeologists arrived with metal detectors. What they found in 18 months of field work rewrote the battle in brass and lead. Every cartridge casing has a signature. Firing pin strikes leave marks unique to individual weapons. Extractor mechanisms leave grooves. Rifling inside barrels leaves patterns on bullets as distinctive as fingerprints. By mapping every casing and matching signatures, the forensic team could track individual weapons across the battlefield. They could see where a specific Winchester was fired from 3 different positions as its owner moved forward, closing distance with each shot. They could see where a specific Springfield jammed at one position, was cleared, moved 20 yards back, fired once more, jammed again, and was found beside a body that had a knife still clutched in its hand. They could see the entire battle unfold in brass. Not through the words of survivors or the assumptions of historians, through physics, through the inarguable testimony of metal hitting metal. And what the brass showed was devastating to the official story. Warrior firearms moved forward, steadily, aggressively, closing distance with the confidence of men who knew their weapons would not fail them. Soldier firearms moved backward, retreating, scattering, breaking apart. The brass told the story the Army refused to hear for a century. 134 individual native firearms on the ground where Custer died. 81 soldier firearms, outgunned nearly 2 to 1.62. Of the native weapons were lever-action repeaters. The rest were a mix of single-shot rifles, captured military weapons, and trade guns of every description. The diversity itself was evidence of something the Army never acknowledged. A sophisticated acquisition network that had been arming Plains warriors for decades while Washington pretended it wasn't happening. Private Charles Windolph, a survivor from Reno's hilltop, estimated that roughly 1 in 4 warriors carried modern repeating rifles. Apply that to a force of 1,500 to 2,000. That is 375 to 500 lever-action repeaters on the field, each one firing 15 rounds per minute, against Springfields that jammed every third round. The frontier myth of primitive savages overwhelmed by superior European technology died in the forensic data. The warriors at Little Bighorn were not technologically inferior. In the weapons that mattered most for this specific engagement, close-range, rapid-fire combat on broken terrain, they were a generation ahead. The military lessons of Little Bighorn are written in the language of failure. Never underestimate your enemy. Never divide your forces against a foe whose strength you have not verified. Never assume technological superiority when you have not bothered to confirm it. The Army chose the Springfield for economy and for the paternalistic belief that soldiers could not be trusted with rapid-fire weapons. That decision, made in a Washington boardroom by officers who would never face its consequences in the field, except for one who did, contributed directly to the deaths of 268 men. Crazy Horse's sweeping envelopment of Custer's northern flank would be studied with admiration at any war college on Earth, if the war colleges were willing to study it honestly. The warriors who fought at Little Bighorn operated within a sophisticated military culture, with its own traditions of strategy, maneuver, intelligence gathering, and coordinated action. They were not savages, they were soldiers. Fighting with better weapons on ground, they knew by heart for a cause that required no explanation. They were defending their families, their homeland, a way of life that had endured on those plains for thousands of years. But here is the paradox that no amount of analysis can resolve. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a victory that destroyed the people who won it. The greatest military triumph of the Free Plains nations accelerated their subjugation with terrible speed. Within 2 years, every free band was forced onto reservations. Crazy Horse surrendered in 1877 and was stabbed to death in military custody. Sitting Bull fled to Canada, returned, and was shot by reservation police in 1890. The buffalo herds that sustained an entire civilization were systematically destroyed. Millions of animals slaughtered until the species that had darkened the plains from horizon to horizon was reduced to a few hundred individuals hiding in remote valleys. The children were taken from their families, loaded onto wagons and trains, and shipped to institutions hundreds of miles from home. Schools with names like Carlisle and Haskell and Phoenix, where the stated mission was to kill the Indian and save the man. Their hair was cut, their clothes were burned. They were beaten for speaking Lakota or Cheyenne or Arapaho, beaten for singing the songs their grandmothers sang, beaten for remembering the names the people who loved them had chosen, taught that the warriors who had outgunned and outfought the 7th Cavalry with Winchesters and Henrys and Sharps and bows were savages who deserved what came next. And at Wounded Knee in 1890, the 7th Cavalry, Custer's own regiment, the unit whose destruction at Little Bighorn had been used to justify 14 years of punishment, surrounded a band of unarmed Lakota men, women, and children at a creek in South Dakota, and opened fire with the Hotchkiss guns the Army had finally decided its soldiers could be trusted to operate. Over 250 killed. Bodies found scattered across a mile of frozen prairie. Women shot in the back. Children shot beside their mothers. The repeating rifles won the battle, but no weapon could win the war that followed. A war of dispossession and cultural annihilation, disguised as policy and progress. Every cartridge casing on that battlefield represents a moment of lived human experience at the extreme edge of existence. A soldier, crouching behind a dead horse, digging at a jammed cartridge with a broken knife, hearing the lever actions working closer and closer in the smoke. A 14-year-old boy loosing arrows into the dust cloud on a hillside, fighting for the grandmother who fed him and the river where he learned to swim. A holy man standing among the lodges, watching his vision come true, knowing that what the soldier's defeat will bring next will be worse than anything that came before. On June 25, 1876, 210 cavalrymen rode into a valley with single-shot carbines and the assumption that technology and destiny were on their side. They were wrong on both counts. The warriors they faced, armed with Henrys, Winchesters, Spencers, Sharps, bows, lances, and an intimate knowledge of every fold in that Montana earth, did not just outnumber them. They outgunned them, they outthought them, and in less than 60 minutes, they annihilated them. Today, the grass grows over Battle Ridge equally, white marble markers where soldiers fell, red granite markers where warriors fought. They stand in the same grass, under the same sky, on the same ridgeline where the dust and the smoke and the sound of 1,000 weapons once blotted out the sun. But beneath that grass, the cartridge cases are still there, 2,361 pieces of brass and lead, still telling the true story to anyone willing to dig.